I'm Major General Rupert Jones, recently retired from the British Army after 30 years, and I'm the son of Lieutenant Col H Jones VC, who commanded 2 Para in the Falklands War and died in the Battle of Goose Green. So turned on the radio, and I think it was the World Service it would have been, and that's when we heard that the Falklands had been invaded. And in my mind's eye, I think this is right, H accelerated, but certainly mentally from that moment on, you know, he was, if there was a task force going to the Falklands, he was quite clear that 2 Para needed to be part of it. My mother, you know, they said goodbye. H went down to Ascension Island, and I think 2 Para hadn't sailed yet, because they obviously sailed behind the fleet on MV Norland, and so H flew down to Ascension Island separately from the battalion to team up with you know, the other command team that were down there from the task force. And he left, and the thinking had been he would go down, spend a few days down, and then fly back and join 2 Para on the Norland. So yeah, my mother recounts that, yeah, they said goodbye, but it wasn't goodbye because you're off to the war. It's goodbye because you're popping down to Ascension Island and you'll be back in a few days' time. Which I think, you know, it's probably quite hard for my mother. I remember a great friend of mine who's sadly died now, Anthony Gordon Lennox. I vividly remember him saying, you know, because it was kind of exciting, so you get a little bit carried away in the excitement, and I remember him saying, "But aren't you worried about your father?" And of course I said, "No, it'll be fine." And there was something about being a forces child anyway, that you're used to them going away. I mean, this was clearly going to prove to be something a bit different, but you know, you're a little bit probably naive at that stage. A car arrived, and it was the regimental secretary and his wife. Or they asked where my mother was, and you know, they waited inside. And my mother got back and went in, and clearly they'd come to tell her about H. So I can picture them going into the house. And then my mother came outside and just called David and me over and just said, "I'm afraid H's been killed." You've got all sorts of things going on. You've got the continuing media circus around this incredible feat of arms, and news was slowly coming through about, you know, what 2 Para had achieved. And then you've got your own, you know, grief that you barely even know what it is yet, but you've got that. And then this kind of circus beginning to fizz around you of friends and family, you know, coming to lend support, and media. A lot of media suddenly turning up. I remember the Paras provided, I'm not sure you'd call them guards, but they some lads to stand at the gate and make sure the media didn't come through, or when they came through, it was on an organised basis. So it was a tough couple of days. And you turn on the news, and there's your father, and of course 40 years later, you're very used to that. But at the time, just my father. She said that she had been presented somewhere along the line a piece of the cannon. That, of course, the VC comes from the Crimean War cannon, and that she has a piece of the metal, a small piece of the metal. And we all had this kind of, we joked about it, obviously, this kind of image of her kind of looking through her you know, her drawers, you know, trying to find her little bit of cannon to show us. And she said, I'd really wanted to find it and show it to you. So that was rather sweet. But she was wonderful. H, he fought and died in the manner which he lived. those who knew him well, when they heard what had happened, were not remotely surprised that he would have done what he did. The battle was not going very well. On reflection, 2 Para had been badly under-resourced for the battle. They weren't given the artillery they needed. They didn't have enough mortars with them because they couldn't carry the mortar bombs. So it was a proper gutter fight, and the daylight had come. They were taking casualties, and they didn't have momentum. And A Company on Darwin Hill had stalled, and H did what all commanders do. You were trained. You go to the point of the battle where you need something to happen, where you need to bring about a decision, and that was quite patently A Company. And when he got down there, it wasn't a very pretty sight. They were pinned down. It was very open, these trench positions, and 2 Para couldn't get up onto the ridge to take them. And his options were quite limited. He didn't have the fire support. He'd asked for the scimitar light tanks, they hadn't been allocated to him. They would have been perfect. They would have dealt with those positions pretty quickly with their 30mm cannons. So he didn't have those. So he tried to redouble the momentum in the attack, and there were further casualties. The company's second in command, Chris Dent, was killed on the hill. So the company had lost its second in command. He lost his adjutant. He was killed on the hill as well. So they were taking casualties at a pretty rapid rate, and the options were pretty limited because B Company on the right flank were in the fight. They were committed. And he could have committed his reserve at that point. And people have said, why didn't he commit D Company? You don't commit your reserve that early in a battle. When 2 of your companies are fixed, it would be a bad staff college solution to commit your reserve at that point. So that wasn't an option. He had to tough out A Company and retake Darwin Hill. And the options were very limited. And A Company, they'd lost a bit of confidence and drive, and he had to get it going again. And when you've personally directed some attacks up onto the hill to try and take the hill from another angle, and more casualties are coming down with people killed, at some point you take the initiative. And I've always said to people over the years, any really good commander, you hope they would have done the same as my father did. Hugh Pike, who commanded 3 Para at the time, and he talks about before Goose Green they thought they were going to win. After Goose Green they knew they were going to win. It really was very, very significant. I very definitely in my military career, I have, as part of my thinking, I have asked myself, what would my father have done in these circumstances? Because I respected him hugely as a father, but also as a soldier. I hope at some point, and it is increasingly happening, that the kind of slightly tiresome naysayers will just move on. And because we're not good in this country at just celebrating success for what it is, or courage. And what my father did, by any standards, was pretty extraordinary. I think we should just celebrate courage and leadership. And the leadership he displayed was a certain type of inspirational leadership. And I hope he'll be remembered for that.